Welcome to another episode of the No Wires podcast, a place where we put pro in protests, where we put sense in nonsense, and we believe, just as a rule, that no tear gas, no tears. And I'm your host, 10V Jack, the illest man south of the Sahara. Now let's get into it. So today we're going to talk about the many Gen Z protests that have taken place, especially this year. I mean, unless you've been living under a rock, that's under a mountain, that's probably under an ocean, you've probably gotten wind of these protests, like in Sri Lanka, last year's Bangladesh, and even this year's protest that we had in Kenya. But today we won't get deep. We won't delve into specifics, really, why the Gen Z of so-and-so country were up in arms. I mean, let's be honest, I attended protests, so why was I up in arms? No, instead we are going to do a simple analysis about the general phenomenon that is youth protests. Why they've been more common, especially last year and this year. Why Gen Z are a force to be reckoned with. And we'll shed some light on what I consider as remnants of old thinking, both socially and politically, as well as old thinking politicians, especially in Africa, and why their days are numbered. And boy, are they numbered. So the protests we'll be talking about are primarily youth-led. I mean, that is both organized and executed by Gen Z. And varying from country to country, obviously the reasons will be different, but then again, not quite. Oh, and just before I forget, Gen Z refers to those who were born between 1997 and 2012. The countries that have experienced these kinds of protests, we can list a few. We can talk about Kenya, we can talk about Nepal, we can talk about Sri Lanka, Turkey, we can talk about Mexico, we can talk about Morocco, we can talk about Madagascar, just to name a few. We can talk about Bangladesh, which is claimed, and I agree fully, to be the first country to experience a nationwide Gen Z protest back in 2024, man. I mean, the scenes were sensational, and it's only recently that their overthrown leader, who is currently in exile in India, I believe, has been handed the death sentence. So if she ever steps foot into that country, it's the rope, it's the electric chair, it's the needle, my guys. And you really can't argue with the ruling because she was found guilty of crimes against humanity. And we saw them. But what about my country? I mean, I'm not even asking for the death penalty here. No, I just need swift justice. But what are we doing? Any justice? The system's a disgrace sometimes, man. It really is. But anyway, the youth in these countries really had valid points for their protests, man. Apart from the corruption and the incompetence and the suppression by what I'd like to call wannabe dictators, we can talk about the youth who protested in Mexico City because of the violent crimes which are made to believe government is not addressing. We can talk about youth protesting in Madagascar because of power and water cuts, man. We can talk about the scores of unemployed youth in Nepal, looking at the rich kids of prominent politicians, famous people, on their social media bragging with Louis V, Cartier boxes and whatnot, thinking to themselves, hell no. And let's be honest here, Gen Z are organizing themselves and protesting at a much younger age compared to our parents or our grandparents. Even the late Raila and co were in their late 30s and early 40s when they were fighting for our rights, man, fighting against Moi. Now compare that with the Gen Z aged 15, 24, lying flat on the ground, taking cover from live fire during the finance bill protests of 2024. And it's partly because of joblessness, because we have a lot of time to kill, as well as being well informed, because with access to the internet, social media, smartphones in general, it prevents us from being lied to by semi-intelligent politicians. Previous generations definitely did not have access to the wealth of knowledge that we have, and at such a young age. So of course we'll riot if you insult our intelligence, man, 100%. And yet, after I calmed down, I took a step back and then I saw the whole matter clearly. It wasn't clear at first until I saw who we were really up against. The real enemy who's held us back for far too long. Before the protests, it was common, at least for me, for old-aged and middle-aged people alike to stop me randomly and remind me how disrespectful and decadent my generation was and how they dearly missed the good old days, where young people stood up in buses to let adults take their seats as a sign of respect, where son respected father, where subject respected king, where man respected tradition. But then the hated finance bill came along, coupled with the threat of our cultural beacon, JKIA, getting ready to be sold to Adani. And let's be honest here, people were ready to give up. People were ready to hang their heads in despair. The youth did what they had to do. The youth came at the government with everything. They fought fire with fire. Later on, the president, in predictable fashion, came along and blamed the whole thing on bad parenting, basically telling Kenyan parents that they failed to teach the kids 3 things: respect, when to shut up, and how to shut up. I don't even blame Mr. President, really. I think he's just a victim of his era. And days after the storming of Parliament, Gen Z became celebrated. They basically became idolized. I was soon after always being reminded that you're the future of your generation. You're doing what has to be done. Keep it up. And I think that anecdote best describes what Gen Z is up against. I mean, let's be frank here. One of the tenets of African tradition is deep, unquestionable respect for authority. It's in our DNA. It's basically, don't talk back to your king, don't talk back to your chief, even if they're leading you astray. And I think this kind of thinking has spilled over unnecessarily, even after independence, to the 21st century. It's in our African DNA and it's been cultivated for so long. Luckily, Gen Z are not tied up by that. They will respect you when you respect them. And contrary to maybe common belief, Gen Z don't like violence. But people, it's also a fight against ignorance, especially in Africa, because hell knows democracy is still a foreign concept in Africa. Not foreign in concept because nations know what democracy is. Have they understood it really? I doubt it. In this system, in this machine called democracy, people, Kenyans, don't know what their role is, and hence don't even know what to ask of their leaders. People are being promised roads, people are being promised markets, and people are genuinely thanking their leaders. I'll be honest, it's sad. People still think that their role ends after they've cast their ballot, and that's it. And that's something that politicians have been taking advantage of, knowing once they get into power, who's going to watch the watchmen, man? That's why we're not seeing these kinds of protests. We're not seeing these Gen Z protests in maybe Australia, maybe like UK, Canada. They're not that common in those areas. That's because the people know their rights. And the politicians know that the people know their rights. You get me? So the people don't ask for bare minimum. You'll not impress me with a road. You'll not impress me with a market stall. We have to stop asking for bare minimum. End of story. You will have to learn how to use democracy. You will have to learn how to use your freedom. You have to stay woke. And as for upcoming dictators like Suluhu, it's all a result of complacency by the general public. The system is faulty. The roof has been leaking for a while and now the whole house is about to fall on top of you. But I know Tanzanian youths will do what has to be done basically. They have to fight for their rights. The young generation, and not just Gen Z, have to fight these forces that have indeed given politicians a false sense of security. In conclusion, these protests are a sign of the times. The global landscape is shifting both socially and politically. The old ways of thinking are being replaced bit by bit, and the long-held beliefs and trust in traditional authority are being torn down bit by bit. And as for the leaders of today, they have a job on their hands. They have to adapt because they are tasked with leading a generation and catering for the needs of a generation that is sometimes 4 times younger than them, and most times 4 times smarter than them. And who knows? Maybe we need younger leaders. Wait, scratch that. We definitely need younger leaders. Out with the old, So what did you think about these protests? Are they necessary? Do we need change? Or are they just protests by a bunch of romantic teenagers with high ideals and unattainable goals? Let's hear your thoughts. Comment below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'm your host, 10V Jack, and until next time, stay honest. Ride or die chick, back to the board. Mrs. Yogopa kukutaja nikikweka kwa hii song. She's so bad, she's so fine. Got me tripping hata kasi picking guy. No receipt, check the price. Cause you're what?